Marcus Wellington stood outside the royal palace gates, adjusting his expensive Italian suit. The morning sun reflected off his diamond-studded watch as he checked the time impatiently. He was the CEO of Wellington Industries, one of the wealthiest men in the country, and he was not used to waiting for anyone. His company had just secured a major contract with the royal family to renovate the palace gardens. And today was the first day of the project. At the entrance stood James Carter, a royal guard who had served the palace for 15 years. His uniform was pristine, his posture perfect, and his dedication to duty was unwavering. James had seen many powerful people pass through these gates, but he treated everyone with the same respect and followed the same protocols without exception. Marcus walked up to the gate with his briefcase in one hand and a large coffee cup in the other. He expected James to immediately open the gate and let him through. Instead, James stepped forward and politely asked to see his identification and authorization documents. Marcus was taken aback. He frowned and said he was the CEO of Wellington Industries and didn't need to show anything to a mere guard. James remained calm and professional. He explained that palace security protocols required everyone, regardless of their position or wealth, to present proper documentation before entering. No exceptions could be made. This was for the safety of the royal family and everyone inside the palace grounds. Marcus felt his face turn red with anger. How dare this ordinary guard tell him what to do? Marcus raised his voice, saying he had an important meeting with the palace administrator and couldn't waste time with such nonsense. He tried to walk past James, but the guard gently but firmly blocked his path. James repeated his request politely, explaining he was simply doing his job and following orders that came directly from the royal family themselves. The confrontation attracted the attention of other guards and some palace staff members who were nearby. Marcus felt embarrassed that these people were witnessing a guard refusing him entry. His pride was wounded and his anger grew stronger. He looked at the coffee cup in his hand and then at James. A terrible idea formed in his mind. He would teach this disrespectful guard a lesson about who really held power in this world. Marcus stepped closer to James with a smirk on his face. He looked directly into the guard's eyes and said that people like James would always be servants, while people like him would always be masters. Then, without warning, Marcus deliberately poured his hot coffee onto James's polished boots and the bottom of his uniform pants. The dark liquid spread across the ground as gasps could be heard from the witnesses. James stood completely still, his expression unchanged, but his hands tightened slightly at his sides. The other guards immediately moved forward, their hands going to their equipment, but James raised his hand slightly to stop them. He looked down at his stained uniform and then back up at Marcus with quiet dignity. Marcus expected anger or fear, but instead, he saw something in James's eyes that made him momentarily uncomfortable. It was disappointment mixed with pity, as if James felt sorry for someone who would behave this way. James spoke in a steady voice that everyone nearby could hear clearly. He said that Marcus had just assaulted a member of the royal guard on palace property, which was a serious offense under palace law. Furthermore, such behavior showed a complete lack of respect, not just for James personally, but for the royal family he served and protected. James explained he would need to file a formal incident report about what had happened. Marcus laughed loudly, trying to regain his confidence. He told James to go ahead and file whatever reports he wanted. He said his lawyers were the best in the country, and no one could touch him. Besides, the palace needed him more than he needed them. His company was the only one capable of completing the garden renovation project on time and within budget. He was untouchable, and they both knew it. One of the other guards had already called the head of palace security, Captain Rodriguez, who arrived within minutes. Captain Rodriguez was a stern woman in her 50s who had worked her way up through the ranks. She had dealt with difficult visitors before, but when she heard what Marcus had done to James, her expression turned ice cold. She asked Marcus to come with her to the security office to discuss the incident. Marcus refused at first, saying he had an important meeting to attend. Captain Rodriguez calmly informed him that his meeting had been canceled the moment he assaulted a royal guard. She gave him two choices: come willingly to the security office, or be escorted there by multiple guards. The choice was his. Marcus realized the situation was more serious than he thought, but his pride prevented him from showing any concern. He followed Captain Rodriguez, still convinced his wealth and influence would solve everything. In the security office, Captain Rodriguez reviewed the security camera footage that had captured the entire incident. She made several phone calls while Marcus sat impatiently in a chair. He kept checking his phone and sending messages to his assistant and lawyers. He was already preparing his defense and planning how to spin this story to make himself look like the victim of overzealous security. After 20 minutes, Captain Rodriguez ended her call and turned to face Marcus. She informed him that she had spoken with the palace administrator and the head of royal affairs, and even a representative of the royal family. The decision had been made quickly and unanimously. His company's contract with the palace was being terminated immediately, effective now. All of Wellington Industries' access to royal properties was permanently revoked. Marcus jumped out of his chair, his face turning purple with rage. He shouted that they couldn't do this to him. The contract was worth millions of dollars, and his company had already invested significant resources into preparing. He demanded to speak with someone in authority who could reverse this ridiculous decision. Captain Rodriguez remained seated and calmly replied that the people who made this decision were the highest authorities in the palace, and their word was final. Marcus tried a different approach. He softened his voice and said, perhaps everyone was overreacting. It was just a small accident with some coffee. He could apologize to the guard, and they could all move past this misunderstanding. Surely there was no need to destroy a valuable business relationship over something so minor. Captain Rodriguez looked at him with cold eyes and said it was not a small accident. He had deliberately humiliated a royal guard in front of witnesses. The security footage showed everything clearly. She continued explaining that the royal family took great pride in their security staff. These men and women risked their lives every day to protect the palace and its inhabitants. They deserved respect, not abuse from arrogant visitors who thought their money made them superior. The royal family had a strict policy. Anyone who mistreated palace staff would face immediate consequences. Regardless of their wealth, status, or business connections, there would be no exceptions and no second chances for Marcus. Marcus realized his usual tactics were not working. He tried to call his lawyers, but Captain Rodriguez informed him that legal action would not help his situation. The palace had the right to terminate any contract if security concerns arose. And assaulting a guard definitely qualified as a serious security concern. She handed him a formal letter that outlined the contract termination and banned him from all royal properties. He was being escorted off the premises immediately, as Marcus was led out through a side exit. Saw James standing nearby with several other guards. James had changed into a clean uniform and looked as professional as ever. Marcus wanted to say something cruel, but the words caught in his throat. There was something about the way James stood there with quiet dignity that made Marcus feel small for the first time in years. He looked away and walked faster toward the exit. Outside the palace gates, Marcus called an emergency meeting with his executive team. When he told them about the canceled contract, there was stunned silence in the conference room. His chief financial officer explained that losing the Royal Palace contract would hurt their reputation significantly. Many of their clients chose Wellington Industries specifically because they had the prestige of working with the royal family. This endorsement had opened many doors for them. The marketing director added that news of the contract cancellation would spread quickly through their industry. People would ask questions about why it happened. If the truth came out about Marcus assaulting a royal guard, it would be a public relations nightmare. Their competitors would use this story to damage Wellington Industries' reputation. Several board members looked at Marcus with concern and disapproval. For the first time, he felt his authority within his own company beginning to weaken. The next morning, Marcus woke up to discover that the story had leaked to the press. A journalist who had connections inside the palace had written an article titled "Wealthy CEO Assaults Royal Guard, Loses $1 Million Contract." The article described exactly what happened, including witness statements from other guards and palace staff who had seen everything. The security camera footage had not been released publicly, but the detailed accounts from multiple witnesses painted a clear picture. Marcus's phone started ringing constantly. News outlets wanted interviews. His clients wanted explanations. His board of directors demanded an immediate meeting. Social media erupted with comments and opinions. Most people were outraged by Marcus's behavior and praised the palace for standing firm against someone who thought wealth gave them the right to mistreat others. Some defended Marcus, saying the punishment was too harsh, but these voices were quickly drowned out by the majority. By afternoon, 3 of Wellington Industries' major clients had contacted them to review their contracts. They expressed concern about being associated with a company whose CEO behaved so poorly. One client, a prestigious hotel chain, canceled their contract immediately, citing values misalignment. Another client, a large real estate development company, put their project on hold pending further investigation. The financial impact was starting to become severe. Marcus tried to issue a public statement through his public relations team. The statement said he deeply regretted the incident and that his actions did not reflect his true character or the values of Wellington Industries. He claimed he had been under tremendous stress and had acted out of character. The statement felt hollow and insincere to most readers. People pointed out that he only apologized after losing the contract and facing public backlash, not immediately after disrespecting the guard. Meanwhile, James Carter continued his duties at the palace as usual. He refused all interview requests from journalists and asked for privacy. His fellow guards respected his wishes and formed a protective circle around him. Captain Rodriguez publicly stated that James had handled the situation with remarkable professionalism and restraint. The royal family sent James a personal letter thanking him for his years of dedicated service and his dignity in the face of such disrespectful treatment. The story captured public imagination because it represented something people felt strongly about. It was about respect, dignity, and the idea that everyone deserves to be treated with basic human decency, regardless of their job or social status. James became a symbol of working-class dignity, while Marcus became an example of entitled arrogance. The narrative spread far beyond just the business community. Marcus watched his carefully built empire begin to crack. His company's stock price dropped. More clients expressed concerns or distanced themselves from Wellington Industries. Several employees started looking for jobs elsewhere, worried about the company's future. The board of directors held an emergency meeting without Marcus present, and rumors circulated that they were discussing his future as CEO. His wife stopped answering his calls, embarrassed by the negative attention their family was receiving. 2 weeks after the incident, Marcus sat alone in his office late at night. The building was empty and quiet. He looked at the financial reports spread across his desk and realized his company had lost nearly 30% of its value. 6 major clients had left, and several others had reduced their contracts significantly. The board had given him an ultimatum: fix this situation within 30 days or face removal as CEO. Marcus had never felt so powerless in his life. He had always believed that money and influence could solve any problem. He had built his entire identity around being wealthy and successful. Now, he was discovering that there were things money could not buy back: respect, reputation, and trust. The coffee he poured on James's boots had cost him far more than he ever imagined possible. His oldest friend, Daniel, came to visit him that evening. Daniel was one of the few people who still answered Marcus's calls. Daniel sat down and spoke honestly in a way that friends should. He told Marcus that the real problem was not the lost contract or the bad publicity. The real problem was who Marcus had become over the years. Wealth and success had turned him into someone who looked down on others and believed he was better than people who worked regular jobs. Daniel reminded Marcus of their childhood when they grew up in a modest neighborhood. Marcus's father had been a construction worker. It's an honest man who taught his son the value of hard work and treating everyone with respect. Somewhere along the way to becoming rich, Marcus had forgotten those lessons. He had started measuring people's worth by their bank accounts instead of their character. Daniel asked Marcus a difficult question. When did he stop seeing people like James as human beings worthy of respect? The question hit Marcus hard. He sat in silence for a long time, thinking about his behavior over the past few years. He remembered other times when he had been rude to waiters, dismissive toward his employees. and condescending toward people he considered beneath his social class. The incident with James was not an isolated mistake. It was part of a pattern of behavior that had developed gradually as he became more successful and wealthy. Marcus realized he needed to make a real change, not just for his business, but for himself as a person. The next morning, he did something he had never done before. He went to the palace and requested to speak with Captain Rodriguez. She agreed to meet him in her office, though her expression made it clear she had no interest in hearing excuses or justifications. Marcus sat down and told her he wanted to apologize directly to James Carter. Captain Rodriguez studied him carefully. She asked why he wanted to apologize now, after 2 weeks had passed. Was it because his business was suffering, or because he genuinely understood what he had done wrong? Marcus took a deep breath and gave her an honest answer. He admitted that initially he only cared about fixing his business problems. But over the past 2 weeks, he had done a lot of thinking about who he had become. He realized he owed James a sincere apology, not because it might help his business, but because it was the right thing to do. Captain Rodriguez remained skeptical but agreed to ask James if he was willing to meet with Marcus. She made it clear that James had no obligation to accept the apology or even listen to what Marcus had to say. James had every right to refuse this meeting. She left Marcus waiting in a conference room while she spoke with James privately. After 20 minutes, she returned with James, who wore his uniform and maintained his professional demeanor. Marcus stood up immediately when they entered. He looked at James and felt genuine shame for the first time. He began speaking, and his voice was different from the arrogant tone he had used 2 weeks ago. He told James he was deeply sorry for disrespecting him and for treating him as if he were less important because of his job. There was no excuse for such behavior. Marcus admitted he had let wealth and success corrupt his character and turn him into someone his own father would have been ashamed of. He continued, saying that James had taught him an important lesson through his dignity and professionalism. When Marcus had tried to humiliate him, James had not responded with anger or revenge. Instead, he had simply stood firm in his principles and done his duty with honor. That response had been more powerful than any words or actions Marcus could have imagined. It had forced him to look at himself honestly and recognize how far he had strayed from the values he once believed in. James listened quietly without interrupting. When Marcus finished speaking, there was a long silence in the room. Then James spoke in his steady, calm voice. He said he appreciated the apology, but he wanted Marcus to understand something important. The problem was not just about one man pouring coffee on one guard. The problem was about a mindset that saw some people as more valuable than others based on money or position. James said he hoped Marcus would remember this lesson and treat everyone he met with basic respect and dignity, from janitors to judges, from waiters to executives. Marcus nodded, genuinely taking in James's words. He asked if there was anything he could do to make amends. James thought for a moment and then made a suggestion. Instead of trying to fix his public image or save his business first, Marcus should focus on changing how he treated people every single day. Real change would show in small actions over time, not in grand public gestures. That was the only way to truly make amends. Marcus left the palace that day feeling different. The meeting with James had not magically solved his business problems. His company still faced serious challenges, and his reputation was still damaged. But something had shifted inside him. Over the following months, Marcus began making changes in how he ran his company and how he treated people. He started learning the names of the cleaning staff in his building. He stopped yelling at his assistants when things went wrong. He began volunteering at a community center in the neighborhood where he grew up. The changes did not happen overnight. They were not always easy. Sometimes his old habits and attitudes tried to resurface. But Marcus kept remembering the way James had stood there with quiet dignity after being humiliated, and it helped him stay focused on becoming a better person. Gradually, his employees noticed the difference. His family noticed the difference. Some of his clients came back, though not all of them. His company survived, though it was smaller and less dominant than before. But Marcus realized he had gained something more valuable than business success. He had regained his humanity and learned that true power comes not from wealth or position, but from treating others with respect and maintaining one's dignity regardless of circumstances.